Good afternoon. We decided that based on the overwhelming response to both our video that we posted on the community input process for the big pool and also the article that was written by the Garden City Telegram, that maybe we should get out here and provide a presentation online for those of you who weren't able to attend any of our community sessions or maybe don't have the time to set something up to do one before the end of the month. So this is your opportunity to see the entire presentation that we've given to community members and to the schools, and maybe use that to weigh in on the survey if you haven't already done it. So we're going to run through that presentation. We are not going to show the video, which we have done in all of our presentations, because it's online, it's on our website, you can find it there, and you can watch it as many times as you like. So let's jump into the big pool. So why are we having this discussion? The reason that we're having this discussion is kind of a three-prong reason, not just one by itself. The first one really is the cost. We're spending $3,337 a day to operate the facility. That makes up three things, basically. You're talking about labor, lifeguards, concession stand people, whatever it takes to run the pool during the summertime. You're talking about chemicals for the pool and water. Now, the labor is a lot because we have to have a lot of lifeguards. We hire in the neighborhood of 50 lifeguards every summer to work at the big pool. And we staff on average 16 to 20 a day to man each of the different locations around the facility. The next piece is the chemicals. We use a lot of chemicals because we're losing 200,000 gallons a day, which is about 10% water loss when you know that we hold about 2 million gallons of water. Average water loss is right around the 5% range. That's what you would consider for evaporation. People getting in and out of the pool, water goes in and out with them. The other 5% is true water loss, water that a normal facility would not be losing that we're losing. So that's what we're talking about here. Almost 27 million gallons a summer. Well, that water doesn't just leave the facility. We have to put water back into the facility every day. So that accounts for two things: more chemicals than we would normally have to use. It also accounts for why the water's so cold. We're pumping that water in each day, 200,000 additional gallons at 55 degrees. So over the course of the summer, it never has a chance to warm up like a smaller pool, like Holcomb or Laken or wherever else you might be going to swim. Those pools warm up as the temperature outside is warm and the sun heats the water. Ours doesn't have that same opportunity because we're putting new water into it each day. And then the last piece of that is water. Now that's $1,000 a day of that $3,337. That's $1,019. And that is the utility cost for water, not the retail cost. So that is, I think someone was asking questions about the utilities. When we're talking about utility costs, we're talking about just the water utility costs, not utilities for the facility. There's not a lot of other utilities that go into the pool because we don't have a heater. Obviously, there's not an air conditioner or anything like that because it's not an indoor facility. We're talking about the utility cost of water, so what we spend to use a certain amount of water. And that's the $1,000 a day. And so when we look at that and we look at how much water we're losing, those two things are obviously problematic. When we look at facilities all over the state of Kansas and in other locations in the US that are either a little bit smaller or have been built more recently, they don't have some of these problems. Their operation costs are a lot lower because they don't have to have as much staff. They're not losing nearly as much water as we are. And so they're driving their costs down a lot more, and they don't have the capital expense that we have. So in addition to that $400,000 that we're spending outside of labor and chemicals and water, we're spending $150,000 to $300,000 on capital costs, on projects, on things that are broken or need to be fixed. We coated the baby pool, the shallow end, and the plunge pool where the slides are, and that project was $150,000 and has to be done every 5 years in order to keep the concrete to hold as much water as possible. Obviously, we're still losing water. The large deep end area needs to have that same project done, but that's a $500,000 project. And when those projects need to be done every 5 years, that's $750,000 every 5 years to do those projects. In addition, we had broken diving boards. We had a corner breakout where we had a large leak that we fixed. Our chemical building needs to be replaced at about an $80,000 cost for everything that's in there. We had to put new filters on last year. We had to buy a new cleaner for the pool because our cleaner wasn't keeping up, it wasn't working. It's always something with a big pool facility. There's always something happening that we have to take care of that ends up being relatively expensive. It's an extremely old facility. The concrete has been there a long time. It has settled, and we just aren't able to keep up with the amount of water and the cost. In addition, the third piece of this is that it's not just about cost and water loss. It's about the fact that we're providing a service. And that service is only being used by 330 people a day. And that's on average. That means that there are days where we have quite a few more, maybe 500 or 600 on a weekend. And then there's days where we have quite a few less, maybe only 100 people. And so we're just not getting a high use of the big pool. Less than half, if you were to take the freshman class at the high school, less than half of that number is using the big pool. So it's a relatively small number. And that can be for a number of reasons. I've heard that it's too cold. I've heard parents of little kids say, it's too big, it's hard to keep track of my kids. I've heard people just say they just don't like it. They don't think that it offers the amenities that other places offer. And so it can be a number of reasons why people aren't using it, but what it comes down to is they're not using it. For whatever the reason may be. That doesn't mean they don't love it. That doesn't mean that they don't care about the history. That doesn't mean that they don't think that the big pool is important to Garden City. They're just not using it. And so as we talked about these three things and we went to the commission and said, here's what we're looking at. The revenue piece is included in here. We do make $91,000 a year in revenue. That is off of admission costs and concession. Now, there were some questions about, well, how are they only making $91,000 in the time that they're open, which is about a little over 8 weeks. How are they only making $91,000? Well, we only charge $2 to get in, and we're only seeing 300 people a day, on average 330. That's only $660 a day. Not that much money. Over the course of the summer, it doesn't add up to that much. We made about maybe a little over $18,000 off of the concession stand, which is pretty good. That's up from the year before. But we can't charge a huge amount for a concession stand when families are struggling to afford the $2 to get in. So we have to balance those two things out, and the pool is not all about making a profit. City services don't typically make profits. They typically break even, or maybe even lose a little bit, but there's something that the community wants. There's something that the community uses, something that's important to the community. And the community's not using this service, which is part of the reason that the revenue number is so low. If we even had double the amount of people, let's say we could get 1,000 people to the pool every day, that amount would double, which would pay for the operation costs of most pool facilities that are of normal size. So just something for people to consider. On here you see that I talk about Dodge City. That's not because I believe we should do a water park, but I wanted people to understand that sometimes an update to your facility, whatever it may look like, might bring more people there, might provide a service that more people are interested in. And so Dodge City used to have a regular size swimming pool, and they saw about 12,000 people a summer. Now with their water park, they see 80,000 people, which is pretty incredible considering the size of their community and considering their location. 80,000 people is a lot of people into Dodge City. So just something for us to think about as we go down this process and we consider the type of service that everyone can enjoy. So in having this conversation about the big pool and talking about the things that aren't going right, we wanted to say, okay, what are the things we need to consider as we're going out and having this conversation with people? And the first thing we said is we have to recognize the history of the big pool. It's so important to a lot of people. We need to do something that would always give people that same feel that the big pool had. So maybe it's a pool in the same location. Maybe it is creating something that still uses the bathhouse, either as an entry gate, as a concession facility, maybe as some shaded area where people can eat or rent out during the summertime. There's a lot of different things we could do to incorporate it, but when you look at that video we posted online, you'll see that the big pool has changed significantly over time. The only thing that has really remained the same is the bathhouse. It, other than the colors on the outside, looks exactly the same. And so maybe that's the piece of the big pool history that we preserve, because we haven't preserved anything else. The trees are different, the shape, the size, all of those things are different than it used to be. The world's largest concrete municipal swimming pool isn't what it was when it was created that way. And so we've changed it over time, out of necessity mostly, because of issues that it's had. And so finding that piece that's important. And so we're open to suggestions. We definitely want to have that conversation. If anybody has ideas, please share them with us. We'd love to hear them. The next thing we want to do is provide a service that more people are going to use. So I would like to see 1,000 or 2,000 people a summer or a day using our facilities, whatever that looks like. 300 a day is just not very many. And so from young to old, we'd like to see everybody be able to use whatever it is that we come up with. We want it to be safe and healthy, and we want it to be aesthetically pleasing. Obviously, whatever we do, wherever we put it, whether it's by the zoo or whether it's in one of our parks, we want it to add value to the communities that it's in, whether it's a neighborhood or whether it's an area like a park or whether it's the zoo area. We want it to be pretty. We want people to be blown away when they drive by it, for it to fit into our community, to Southwest Kansas, whatever it may be. We want to address community expectations. If it is your expectation that we operate each summer under a $50,000 budget, then I can tell you, we need to go away from swimming. We need to go towards water park or splash parks or things that don't require a lot of labor. If your expectation is that we have a concession stand wherever we go, then we need to budget for that. We need to be aware that we're going to need labor for that. If your expectation is that we have a swimming facility that is capable of holding more than 2,000 people a day, then we need to think about that. If your expectation is that we provide a service that is open year-round, that's something we need to consider. And so trying to meet those community expectations, whatever they are. Water use and water conservation is obviously high on the list because of the amount of water we're losing now. For a swimming facility, that 5% range, if you're talking about a splash park or something else, we can talk about reusing and retreating the water. And the last piece of this is engaging as many people as possible. So we went to every school from 3rd grade to 12th grade to try and talk to students. We set up community sessions, we've made flyers, we have been out talking to every social group. Anyone who will let us get in front of them and have a conversation, we have been there and we have done that. And that's part of the reason that we're doing this video now, is because we don't want anyone to not have an opportunity to hear what we have to say. Because there are so many rumors and there are so many things about this process and what we're doing, and it just needs to be about the conversation right now. We are just trying to talk about a solution for a problem that we have and come up with an end result. So I want to engage as many people as possible. I hope everyone who hasn't goes and takes the survey, because that's the only way your opinion is going to be known. So as we talked about, okay, here are our problems, here are our objectives. What about spaces? What about locations? Does it have to go where it is now? Are there other locations? What if we did more than one facility? What if we wanted community pools or splash parks? Or what if we wanted a water park? Whatever the case may be, maybe the reason people aren't using it is access. Maybe where the pool is now used to be a fantastic location for kids, full of kids in that area. And maybe now it's not. Maybe now the kids are more concentrated in other areas. And so we started talking about park locations. And the list that we have here, if it has a star beside it, that means it could have a community pool or a splash park. If it doesn't have a star, that means it can only have a splash park. There's not enough room for a pool. We had GIS go out and actually take flyovers of each location so that you can see them. The first one is the current location. We obviously have a huge space here that we could do a lot of different things with. You could go back with a pool, much like we have now, take out the concrete, put new concrete in, new pipes, all of that sort of thing, and make it into basically a large swimming pool. You could go with a smaller facility and maybe a splash park. You could go with a smaller facility and some other use. Maybe it's sand volleyball, or maybe it's miniature golf, or maybe it's something else. We've had kids come up with a lot of different ideas. Or you could put a water park here. You could go with just a mega splash park. There's a lot of different things you could do, but our footprint is large. And so this is a really good spot. It's also a really important spot for our community because a lot of people go by it to go to the zoo or go to the park. And so it's a really wonderful location to put something. What? That's for you guys to decide. The next one is Finnup Scout Park, and this is at 8th and Emerson. The city actually owns and maintains the park on the right-hand side of this photograph. You can see it's kind of surrounded by trees. It's a pretty good-sized park, but the city also owns the entire lot next to it, from the tree line all the way to Emerson Road. And so, although the picture doesn't give you quite the size of this lot, it is a huge lot. This lot is massive if you go out there and take a look at it. And nothing's being done with it, it's just dirt right now. It's also a really good location because it comes off of Taylor and down Mary as an entry point to our community. You can kind of see this lot from Mary, and definitely could see it if there was something on it. And this is a high need area. There's a lot of kids here. I talked to Gertrude Walker, which is a very diverse school. And this would be a really utilized location. So maybe a splash park or a mega splash park, which I'll show you shortly. But something that could be free and have extended hours. If we had a mega splash park or a splash park here, you could have open hours, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and it could be free for use. The other thing you could put here is a community pool. Not a large one. You definitely couldn't put anything as large as you could put on the current location, but you could do a smaller community pool at this spot, and I'll show you some of those here shortly. The next one is Southeast Community Park, and I'm sure most of you are aware, if you're familiar with this location, you can see VO, the blue rooftop, and that is, there's not a park here yet, but the city has approved a project in 2019 to build a playground here. And there's some room left over that we could add a splash park. Not a big one, just a small one, which I'll show you in some photographs, but this is also another high need area. There's a ton of residential development. This backs up to kind of the Wilson addition and then some of the new housing across Shulman, and then also East Garden Village. And so there's a ton of space here where kids could utilize the playground and maybe a splash park or something like that. The next one is Rotary Park, 3rd and Johnson. I initially thought when they showed me this park that this would be a fabulous location because it's close to Georgia Matthews, 3rd Street, the walking trail. It just seemed like it had a lot of makings for a community pool or a splash park, in that there's a lot of space. But as we went around to the schools, I think this was one of the things that we learned most valuable, is that this is not a good location. The kids don't want us to put anything here. And the reason is because they already utilize this space for soccer and flag football. They don't want us to take away something that they're already getting to do and replace it with something else. And so that was something we learned that we wouldn't have otherwise known. The next one is Dean Wiley. This was a really popular park with the kids, not necessarily because it was one that they lived close to, although they identified living close to it, even if they didn't. But I think it was a high-use park. Baseball, softball, the snow cone place is really popular. There's a playground here, a walking trail, and so a lot of families were really familiar with this particular park. Then we have Harold Long Park. Sorry, Harold Long Park is the walking park, or as most people know it as the walking park. There's not enough room for a pool here or a community pool, but there is room for a splash park. Downtown is not a traditional place for a splash park or something like that, but what we were thinking is more along the lines of what they have in big cities, where you have like a 9x9 square where it's just flat on the surface and it sprays water. And we've talked about you could add lights at night. You could do a lot of different things that add beautification to downtown, but also give a place to cool off when there's events or other things going on. So after we talked about locations, we obviously had to come up with some concept ideas. We needed to go to other communities and find out what other people were doing, what it costs, and how much it costs to operate their facilities. Now, on all of these concepts, you're going to see admission prices that are well over $5. I don't think that for most of these that's feasible for Garden City. We're probably looking in the more $2 to $3 range because that's truly what our community can afford. And so we need to be mindful of that when we're thinking about what we're going to build. This facility here is in Fremont, Nebraska. They spent $5 million to build it. And with inflation rates, it would cost us around $6 million to build this. They have average operation expenses of $281,000 a summer. If you remember, ours are about that $450,000, $460,000 range without capital costs. And obviously a newer facility, they have relatively little capital expense right now. They have big slides, they have some big diving boards, they have a little train for their baby pool. This is a large swimming facility. They also have a huge indoor facility where their bathhouse and concession stand and that sort of thing is run out of. So all of these things can be changed. The theme, the colors, the size, all of the things, the shape. But this is if we were going to take out the big pool and go back with another really large facility. One single facility potentially. The next one is a concept for multiple community pools. So if we were talking about putting a small pool in every park, I mean, there's probably 4 or 5 parks that we have space for that. These run about $500,000 a piece to build. You're talking about a diving board and a slide, nothing fancy, a place to cool off. You don't get a lot of shallow depth in these areas, and you don't get baby pools typically, and so you have to factor that in. They can have relatively low admission prices, you know, maybe $1 to get in because you can run them with 1 to 2 lifeguards, and you have more facilities for people to use. But there's no big slides, there's no big diving boards, no additional features. Then the part about these that are enticing is that people can ride their bikes or they can walk to them. The liability is a little bit higher, and a lot of communities are actually going away from this model because of the liability to maintain them and to take care of them and to keep people out of them when they're not open. But I didn't want to not include them because this may be something that our community is interested in. The next one is a community pool, like if you were thinking in multiple aspects, not at every park, but if you were thinking maybe 2, one on one side of town and one on another side of town. This facility here is smaller than the big pool. This is more of a normal sized community pool. It's still large. You can see that there's, you know, 8 or 9 swimming lanes. 6, 7, 8. Okay, maybe there's 10 swimming lanes. Big slides, they have a little slide, diving board, baby pool. They have a really large indoor facility, which maybe we don't need quite as large of an indoor facility. Maybe we can make that smaller. Maybe we want the shape different. I've had kids say that they want a lazy river or a rock climbing wall or a special baby pool area that has some extra slides or an additional shallow end for little tiny babies. I've had some kids say they're interested in a surfing area, which all of these concepts we're finding ideas, and in our final report we'll make sure to enclose those, and so you'll get a chance to see what those look like and those cost. But this is just kind of what we came up with. This one was built several years ago for $1 million, and with inflation today it would cost us around $2 million to build, with an operation expense of about $210,000. Now that does include their indoor facility. So maybe it would be less for us if we chose to build a smaller facility or we chose to do the indoor portion a little bit different. The next one is a splash park, and I don't particularly like this splash park. We used this idea for size. If we were gonna put splash parks in all of the parks, this is more, other than 8th and Emerson, this is more the size you would be looking at for a park. Not too big, enough space to splash around, no fence, no concession, no lifeguards. Colored concrete would be an addition that probably we would want to use, and we'd probably want colored attractions that were attached to it, maybe themed to the park that they were in or themed to the school that it was closest to. Some history to Garden City or to Southwest Kansas that would make them really beautiful or add to the areas in which we put them. These run about $1 million to build. They're typically free for community to use. The water can be recycled and reused, and they can be open longer. So you could potentially, if you were having a warm season, open them in April and keep them open through October. So it gives you that opportunity. It also gives you the opportunity to flip a switch, turn them on at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning and keep them open till 9 or 10 o'clock at night if you have lights. So there's a lot of flexibility in a splash park in a park. It also provides a service to those who can't even afford the $2 or $3 that it costs to get into the big pool. The other thing it does is it allows children who are within walking distance, they can ride their bike or they can walk. They don't have to catch a ride, which means they may not be able to use the facility. The next one is a mega splash park, and this is in Centennial, Colorado. This would cost the city about $2.75 million to build. Typically free to use. Operation costs are low because, again, no lifeguards, no labor. There's really nothing to the facility other than the water, which you're reusing and retreating. Mega splash parks can have more than you would typically imagine in a splash park. There might be slides, rope swings, trees to climb, towers, surfing. anything you can think of as long as there's no submergible water. So there's no area to swim, it's just a cool off place. These take a little more space. So the current location or 8th and Emerson are about the only places that you could make something like this work, and they are a little more expensive to build. But you do get more space out of them, and you can add different facilities, attractions to them. The next one is a water park. I chose Salina over Dodge because I like the way Salina set up their water park in a circle, but this is a huge water park. This is a $16 million project for Garden City. Dodge City was about a $10 million project, so you can imagine in different sizes. You could definitely go with something that looked more like Dodge or even like Liberal. I've also heard Hayes has a wonderful water park, so maybe there's some other options out there. You could also say we don't need a water park. We just need some of the features that a water park has. So I want some of these big slides, or I really want the lazy river, or whatever it may be, but I want to incorporate that into a normal size swimming pool facility. Keep the costs down, keep the admission price down, keep the operation costs down. But this facility, even as big as it is spending $60,000 less on operation expenses than the big pool. That's mostly because of water loss, which accounts for also chemical expense, but it's also some labor. The way the big pool is set up, we have to have a lot of lifeguards on staff to operate it, and so it becomes very costly. In addition, we're losing more than 5%. We're losing almost 10%, or a little over 10% actually. And so that factors into our expenses that they don't have to worry about because obviously it's a newer facility. Oh, but the one thing I do want to say about a water park is you are looking at a higher admission cost. You're looking at a $4 to $6, which for some of our community is maybe no problem. But we really want to provide a service that people can use 2 and 3 times a week, or every day if people want to. And I just don't know that getting to something like this, that people are going to be able to afford it, or that it's something that is going to make sense for all of our community. And so we definitely need to consider that as well. The next piece is a competition pool, and a competition pool we're talking about in this conversation is an outdoor competition pool, much like we have now. Maybe more lanes, maybe set up differently, part of the same facility, part of a separate facility, but a single competition pool is right around the $500,000 range, and depending on how you run it and how you operate it, that's going to factor into your operational expense. There has been some discussion and some requests recently about looking at an indoor facility, and so we've kind of tasked those individuals with getting some of that information, and we'll present that in our final report as well. But at the time that we did this, we did not take that into consideration. We weren't aware of that being a need, and so it has been part of our conversations, but not something that we've included in our presentation. So this is just a few of the pictures as we went around and talked to the schools. You can see we really did. And so where are we now? We want you to take the survey. I mean, at the end of the day, whether your opinion is that you would like the big pool to stay where it is, or whether you want us to do some other project that we didn't include here. That's why the survey is important. Ultimately, my goal is to take the money that we're spending on the big pool and turn it into something that more people use and a workable solution that's not spending nearly as much money and wasting as much water. If we can do those 3 things, I think that we'll be successful. The quality of life, economic development opportunity, hub city activity, community beautification, your tax dollars, your community, your youth, all of these things are important, but at the end of the day, it's really about pride. This entire process is about pride. Everyone is struggling with the conversation, or those who are struggling with the conversation are struggling with the conversation because of pride, because of how much they love and how much pride they have for the facility that we have. And that's perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable. I'm coming at this conversation from a different place. I'm coming at it like this. If we don't make a decision, if we don't decide to do something different with these funds and spend them differently on a facility that can do better, there will come a day that the big pool won't be able to open. The concrete hole may still be there, the bathhouse, the fence, everything may look the same, but there may not be water in it. You can drive by and admire it. You can go there and tell your kids or your grandkids that that's where you used to swim, or for some of you, that's a facility that you helped build or that your grandparents helped build or whatever it may be, but there may not be water for swimming. And the first time that happens, that those funds are diverted to something else, whatever it may be, maybe it's police or fire or some other city facility that needs those funds to do something different because the big pool's not in operation, the first time that happens is the first time we've taken a step away from really considering water recreation as a city service. And so I'm trying to be at the front side of that conversation and really get out there and say, if we have to do something differently, what does that look like for you, for your family, for your friends, for our community to have a high use facility? And so that's really what we're talking about here, and I want to see us do better. So we do have a couple of things that have come up over and over again question-wise, and so I'm going to run through those so that everybody can hear generally what the answer is. Okay, so the first question that we've gotten over and over again is, can we fix the big pool and just keep it? My answer is going to trail back to what I kind of just said, which is maybe there's a fix out there that we or engineers have not found. And if you have that fix, or you know what the answer to that is, please reach out to me and let's have a discussion about that. Our belief is that the concrete settling over time and the older pipes and all of the things that factor into the age of the pool and the time that it's been there and it's been outdoors factors into that water loss. Sure, of course there's going to be water loss for evaporation. I've seen that over and over and over again in our Facebook posts, and that is absolutely true, but not to the extent that we are now. So my answer to that question really is no. We cannot fix the big pool and keep it. Now, could we take the big pool out and build it exactly as it is right now? Sure, if that's what you want, if this community believes that the big pool exactly as is what this community desires, then we can absolutely do that. But you're probably looking at that first concept I showed you, which was around that $6 or $7 million. We've got to take out all the old facility. Now we can reuse, my guess would be, the big slides. We might even be able to use the plunge pool there, the baby pool maybe, the slide for the baby pool, and probably the splash park because some of that's newer. But the bulk portion of the pool would have to come out. And if we're going to do that, don't you want say in what it looks like? Maybe your say is that it should go back exactly like it is. Maybe your say is that it should go back to what it used to be. Maybe your say is that it shouldn't look anything like it looks now, but it should be in the same location. Or maybe all you care is that there's some sort of swimming. So that's really what we're talking about. But as for fixing it, I don't think the question is whether or not the big pool can be fixed. I think the question is, if we can't fix the big pool, what are the other options? Where do we go from here? The next question is, can we bring the elephants back? We've seen that a couple times, and we all love the elephants too. But the elephants are no longer part of our zoo. We don't have elephants anymore. They've gone to Colorado Springs, for those of you that are not aware. And so we can't bring the elephants back to swim in the pool. So that's not an option, sorry. Will the pool be open this summer? Yes, the pool will be open this summer. I'm actually working with staff now to get lifeguards interviewed, get lifeguards hired, get swimming suits and all of the things that we need to operate the summer. And we will be open, and we will hopefully have that calendar out in April for the entire season, along with season passes and all of the things that you have come to expect from the city as we've been managing the facility. What about an indoor competition pool? I kind of hit on that a minute ago. We didn't do a lot of research on indoor competition facilities because we didn't realize that that was something that some of the community was interested in. So we will include that in our final report. We will have some numbers, just like we had here, what other communities are doing. I've been given examples such as Lakin and Ulysses, and I'll look into those. I'll find out what it costs to build, what they charge for an admission or how they pay for the facility, and what they look at an operation cost, because it goes then from operating 8 to 10 weeks, you're operating for an entire 52 weeks a year. So your costs definitely are going to increase. How will you preserve the history of the big pool? I kind of touched on that briefly, and so if you haven't heard the presentation, you may not know what that is, but now that you've heard it, you should know. We don't know what that is. We're open to suggestions. There's all sorts of options that can work. We immediately went to the bathhouse because we thought that that's where the history of the big pool really was and is in the photographs that you can watch on the video we posted. But if you have other ideas, we're open to it. Why is the water so cold? So I kind of hit on that. The water is so cold because we're losing over 200,000 gallons a day, which means we're replacing 200,000 gallons a day of cold 55-degree water. So when we do that, it doesn't have a chance to warm up. It stays cold throughout the entire season. How long will this all take? That question is hard for me to answer. I can tell you that I will provide a final report to the commission in March at their second pre-meeting. They will have it on for a commission meeting in April to make a final decision on whatever project the community has put before them. And after that, it really depends. It depends on engineers, on design, on contractors, all of those things. But we would hope to get moving on it once the commission has made a final decision. So hopefully those answered a lot of your questions. I know there are probably other questions, and if you put your additional questions on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever you can put them, or if you send them to me directly, my email address can be found on our website, as can my direct telephone line. Please feel free to use either of those. I'm happy to chat with you at any time about this project or this process. Answer any questions that you have, or entertain any ideas or suggestions that you have. And so really, we just want this to be an open conversation. We want everybody to participate. We want everybody to be able to be on the same page and understand where we're going. There's been a few people in my community presentations that have said that there's people in the community that think the city has already made up their mind about this, that they know what they want to do. And I'll be the first one to tell you that that's absolutely not true. That's why we're asking your opinion. It's not often that you get to participate in a process like this, and so we're excited. We want to know what you think. We're going to read every comment from every survey, as are the city commissioners. And so I think it's really important to take this opportunity to engage in your community and decide what the future is. Because it's coming, whether you want to be part of it or not, and the big pool is going to go away at one point or another. It may never actually physically go away, but the ability to swim there and utilize it as a water recreation facility is going away. And as it does, we've got to be ready to answer that call, and this process is hopefully doing that. So if you have questions, concerns, reach out to me. I'd be happy to chat. If you have a group that's meeting and you'd like me to come and talk to them, or you have some other thing that you would like me to participate in, please reach out and let me know. I'd be happy to do that.